right. Hello and welcome again to a new episode of the KewCast. I'm John. I'm joined again by my good friend Eddie.
Hey, Johnny.
Hey, how's it going?
Man, you're going to have to do some heavy lifting today. I've been hit in the face like multiple times this last week. The last one like popped me right in both lips.
Oh, Christ.
So like the inside of this bottom lip is all cut up and it's like rubbing
Really?
against my teeth. I mean, it was a line drive right to the
All right,
kisser.
who did it? Who did it to Eddie? I'll go look him up and have a stern talking to him.
Come forward in the comments.
Mod TA15?
Yeah, all 3 times. Different people, but with the mod, and it's coming too fast, man.
I know.
Somebody's got to do something about this.
Hopefully they are. All right. Yeah, I've been hit in the face a couple times. And not in the like I've been able to turn my face. I get hit in the ear a lot when I turn really quick, but man, just like right in the front of the face. That's brutal.
They were all the same kind of shot too, kind of low, a little bit lower than the top of the net. And they were trying to go for that, that top spin, and it just was a line drive straight to my head.
Boink. God. That's what pickleball's turning into. Well, we'll see. Like that, we are regulating paddles at this point. Everybody knows that paddles are getting too hot, So
you talk, I'll nod.
Okay. Well, we've got a good show, Eddie. I'm going to talk about the YOLA event that I went to last week. That you, unfortunately, were not there. Everybody missed you, Eddie. A lot of people were asking, honestly, where's Eddie?
Next time around.
Okay. Little PPA Mesa Cup recap. I got some paddles of the week. This week we battled it out, you and me, on the court. I wouldn't say it was a battle more than a massacre, a one-sided massacre. Where you just ate my lunch. But it was between the Proton Flamingo and the YOLA Perseus IV.
2 great paddles.
Yeah, I was impressed with both of them.
Yep.
And this week for the gear deep dive, I'm going to talk about what I've been doing with the ball cannon again. So I'm getting some preliminary PBCoR results, some exciting stuff. And then on to Q&A.
All right.
Okay, well, let's jump into the YOLA event. So this will give you a good amount of time to rest your face.
Okay, go.
Because there's a lot to talk about. So it was fantastic. So it was in Las Vegas. By now, this is going to be published tomorrow, Friday, our podcast. Everybody else who was there has already published theirs. I'm a procrastinator, Eddie. I do my stuff later than most people. But I'll try to avoid like talking exactly what everybody else talked about. But last year, New Orleans, this year, Las Vegas, and it was at kind of this mansion off in the foothills overlooking the Strip, which was pretty cool. Like the venue was fantastic. And it was actually like a young pro. I think he's like 10 years old, and YOLA signed him. And so gracious of the family to host this event. And it was stacked. The roster from YOLA was stacked. So we had Richard Lee, the CEO, Gordon K, which is the CXO. You know Gordon.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Played with him last week.
Yeah, he's the one that asked about you.
All right.
One of them. Brian Gleason, he's their brand strategist. Austin Kim, I've had conversations with him before. He's basically their product manager in the pickleball vertical. We've got brand manager for Agassi, Kevin. Caleb, who's their chemical engineer. They brought on, I think he used to be at Nike. He was the one asking the hard-hitting questions at the USAP Media Day, right? Christian Bouchard organized it all. Bobby Keith, strategic manager for their online, and a few other people, videographers and everything. So they came prepared. And one cool thing, like the culture of this year's, I don't know what to call it, just an event, was much different than last year's. Like last year's, it was very kind of formal, and they got up and gave presentations, and it was very much like we paddle reviewers were kind of there, but they didn't know what to do with this. This year, they like welcomed us with open arms, and they were joking with each other and brought us in and just made us feel like family. And it sounds kind of cheesy to say that, like of course he's going to say that, like they brought him to this mansion and treated them well, but it was very much not like a snooty feel like, oh, we're too good for these paddle reviewers. So I liked it, and they were very open. I am under an NDA, so I can't talk about too many details about the core, but I can show the paddle. All that's going to be coming out on March 4th with the launch of the paddles. Anyway, so that was on the YOLA end. A bunch of paddle reviewers were invited. Sort of the usual suspects that I know. So, Chris Olsen, Isaac Olsen, Braden. Braden's whole crew was there. So Aaron, his video editor, and Kyle, his co-host, were there. So Braden was walking around with his whole posse. And a lot of other people have talked about this, including Chris and myself, but Braden is so different in person than he is on his videos and in his podcast. Like he's very kind of buttoned up on his videos, and in person he's just loose and joking, and he's just ribbing people. He's really fun to hang out with, and I've known that for a good while about Braden. But a lot of the other content creators were just like, man, this Braden was so different. I'm seeing. Anyway, so yeah, a bunch of other paddle reviewers.
Yeah, Braden's a very cool guy. He's very down to earth.
Yeah.
No pretentiousness.
For sure. I enjoy hanging out with Braden. Got to meet for the first time Lewis from Pickleball Pursuit. I met Justin, his co-host, back last year at Worlds. But Lewis, another one of these guys that he doesn't seem buttoned up in his online persona, but he's very kind of, smooth, and he's got that nice voice. In person, he is just a total goofball. I loved hanging out with Lewis. Just hilarious. Like I kind of suspected, because we have this chat group that Lewis is a part of, and he's just always cracking jokes in there. But man, he is just a court jester out in the wild. So it was good to meet up with him. So YOLA sent out these emails, and most people had their own rooms, and they sent out this email, and they were like, "Hey John, you're rooming with BK Pickleball," and I was like, "I'm seeing this stuff, but I don't know him. It's kind of weird. I'm just going to get my own room." So I got my own room, and then I met BK, and he ended up being like one of the coolest guys I ever met. So I wish I would have roomed with him, but it was just, I'm a grown man, Eddie.
Yeah, you need your own space. I hear you.
I don't like to room with people that haven't met yet, but BK, he's actually a pro pickleball player, and he's just fantastic on the court. Really cool guy. I would love to hang out with him more. Other folks, David from Tickle My Pickleball. That's his online persona. He also co-hosts a All Drive No Drop podcast. Steven from STS Pickleball. JJ and his co-host Graham were there. Christy Price, she was my mixed doubles partner at Worlds. She's also starting to do some things in content creation. Rafa, pickleball tech dude. Chris Carson was there.
Oh, no way.
Yeah, he's the Pickleball Central guy. Used to be DJ Selkirk.
Right.
A couple of people I didn't really know. Andre Agassi, Steve
I don't know
Aoki. I don't know.
No.
But yeah, that was a shocker. So Andre showed up the night. Okay, so we split off into two, and there were 2 days of this. And our group was like me and Chris and Braden and Lewis and BK. And then the second group went the next day, and that was STS and JJ and Christy and Rafa. But we all met the night of the first night that my group was in, and we were just. There was tacos, and there was, a festive atmosphere, and then Andre Agassi shows up, and I'm just like, so I don't know. He played high school tennis, right? Or, no, you don't have a tennis background.
Never
That's right.
tennis.
I was big into tennis in high school, and he was one of those, like him and Steffi Graf, and they were just like idols back then. So it was, I don't get starstruck very often, but it was really cool to see
And
Andre.
was Steffi with him at that point?
No. And got to play a game with him. And he just loves playing pickleball. And let me tell you, that Tui is no joke. You can tell he's just an elite, world-class athlete, and his precision with that Tui is just like a laser beam. And he was just like drilling. So I don't know what his overall duper is. I mean, it's probably on duper somewhere, but I can tell you, like sitting next to him, his drives are like pro level. And his soft game is probably, 4-5 or something like that. So somewhere between 4-5 and 6-0 overall,
Right.
And it was cool to see, too. We were actually playing Braden and Isaac, and they're both way better than me. And we ended up winning the game. It says something about Andre, right? And there was a moment, like we were down like 5-1, and he just turned it on. He was just like, all right, I'm in it to win this, right?
All right.
You could just feel his energy.
Were you on the right side, John?
What do you right side, John? We didn't stack, but we should have. But no, we shouldn't have because his 2E backhand
That's
is
true.
what the deadly
That's
thing.
true.
So, yeah, wherever you can hit that shot. Anyhow,
Any dinking that game?
not much thinking. But it was great to see him, and they also are like, hey, Steve Aoki's coming, and I'm like, Chris and I were like, who? And everybody's like, you don't know Steve Aoki? I'm like, I don't. It rings a bell. He's apparently like world famous DJ, you know. And he showed up, and I did recognize him. I'm like, oh, it's that guy. And he's a fan of Andre Agassi, so he was playing around, him and his girlfriend, I think, maybe wife, I don't know. And yeah, it was just crazy that these celebrities were there.
So was Agassi playing with that new Agassi model?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So there's a new Andre Agassi model.
Man, Gordon was playing with that the other day and just ripping some drives, man. That thing has got some nuts power.
He loves that thing. I'm gonna have to get used to that shape. So
Yeah.
I don't have it with me, but it's kind of looks like a Babolat shape, you know, Babolat paddle shape, kind of narrow at the bottom and flares out a lot
bit
toward the top, you know. Not as severe as like, is it the Wizard that does the crazy taper?
Yeah.
Not as severe as that, but it's definitely a narrowish paddle. It's elongated and super narrow on the bottom, which means it's top heavy, and it's great for a tennis player to get that whip, you know. And I liked it. I played with it on the court with Andre. I had the Perseus, and they're like, you need to switch that out for the Andre if you're going to be recording a game with him. And I got more used to it. The sweet spot's a little narrower, as you would expect, than a wider, square shape, but yeah, it did feel good when he got that sweet spot, that whip you get with the heavy paddle.
Sure.
Nice.
Yeah.
Yes. So all good times, and they gave a presentation. I can't talk, like I said, I'm under an NDA. I can't talk too much about the core technology, but suffice it to say, and I haven't heard back. I think I can talk about the prices. If not, I'll just clip this out or bleep it out. So it is launching on March 4th. So there are two paddles, the Perseus IV and the Agassi Pro, which both have the same internal technology. Launching on March 4th for $280. So they're not changing the price from their previous priced paddles. The Scorpius, Magnus, and Hyperion are coming in April. And they are also continuing with their 3S models, so the ones that are already out, and they're dropping the price of those down to $240. And those will, in fact, be dual certified. Somebody was asking that. I was like, I don't think they're ever going to, go the USAP route. Well, they are. They're going to do the dual certification. They're also the Perseus IV and eventually the Magnus and Hyperion and Scorpius are all going to be dual certified also, but they're allowing an option for UPA only certification. The reason being is that UPA allows a grittier texture because they're measuring spin, actual spin, and USAP eventually will get there, but it doesn't matter how much grit. There's no grit requirement. So they're actually very gritty, and you can feel like the Flamingo.
So same power output. We're just looking at a different surface.
Texture. Exactly. Well, same power output and good spin, but the Flamingo is a paddle that has great grit. That's dual stamped. I don't know how they got that gritty, but that feels like what the.
This doesn't feel well, yeah, it does actually.
Yeah, you can file your nails with it.
Not so much down here, but
okay, yeah. Anyhow, so those options will be both in the 3S. Dual certification or UPA only, and in the 4 models and the Agassi Pro. And the reason why people might go for the UPA only is because it's grittier. I don't know if it spins more. We'll find out. I need to run I don't have one
will
of
they
each.
each be in 2 thicknesses?
The what?
Will they each be in 2 thicknesses?
So I know the Perseus, yes. I got the 14 and the 16. I don't know about the Agassi, but I know the Perseus will. They are sunsetting their Gen 2 paddles, so the original Perseus, Hyperion, and Scorpius, those are being sunset together with the Mod TA15, right? And the reason they gave for that is, one of the reasons is because they had the compressed cores. All of them did, and they're moving away from that. They don't want to. They know that those break prematurely. They don't want to do that anymore. Go down that path. So those are all gone. Now, the new technology, I can at least say the name, it's called Tech Flex Plus Propulsion Core, so TFP. And you can see it it says TFP on the Perseus. That's all I can say.
Okay.
Right. All right. More coming, obviously, on March 4th when it releases. There we go. That's kind of
So
my...
other than what you've already talked about, John, what's like your highlight of the trip?
Oh, highlight of the trip, definitely playing beside Andre Agassi. Yeah.
Yeah.
And just getting to meet some of the other paddle
Any chance
reviewers
he
that-
asked you to just be his permanent partner?
No. I'm pretty sure he has no idea who I was and has completely forgotten about me since then. But he was gracious to play with me.
That's an awesome experience, though.
Yeah, for sure.
Amazing.
All right, Eddie.
Moving on.
Moving on. Did you get a chance to watch much of the Mesa Cup?
You know, I watched the match that everyone's talking about, the mixed doubles quarterfinals?
Ooh, I think it was semis. Are you talking about Anna Bright
Semis. Right.
and Deckel versus Ben and Lee Waters?
Deckel Bar was just...
When he's on, man, unstoppable.
Seriously, he was on fire that match.
Wow.
But man, the consistency of all four players is just... What they can reset is just freaking outrageous.
Yeah, for sure.
Just outrageous. Such
It is.
incredible touch to be able to take just a full power shot from any one of those four and put it back in the kitchen is just...
It's craziness.
sick.
Or even to counter something
Right.
like that is crazy. And TV doesn't do it justice. I know everybody always says that, but you know, every time you see these matches live, you're there, you're just like, oh wow, that's a whole new level.
Yeah.
You know, like when I went to interview Gabe, I walked into this facility, he and Ben were playing Hayden and Andre, and immediately like a hand battle broke out, and he was just like pow 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 pow, and I was like, what in the world? Like TV doesn't do it justice. It was insane to watch, and just the skill and reaction time and anticipation, coordination is just pickleball, man. It's becoming an elite sport, you know.
So much fun to watch.
It's so much.
I mean, even as a pickleballer, some of these matches weren't that great to watch a year ago, 2 years ago.
Sure.
And now it's just the elite level is so amazing to watch.
I mean, this Mesa Cup, I was on the edge of my seat on several of these matches. That was probably the most nail-biter one, was the semifinals where Deckel and Anna Bright beat Ben and Anna Lee. But there were a bunch. Like every match I watched, the cool thing about it is there's so much parity in the field right now that you don't know who's going to win. Ben and Anna Lee are still dominant for sure. But it's just like, you don't know what the cards are going to be on Championship Sunday.
You really don't.
And you don't, even if it is the usual suspects, you don't know which of these teams are going to win.
You know, not too long ago, maybe 6 months ago, John, we talked about, you know, the pro atmosphere in general, the whole universe of professional pickleball. And we both said that we're getting close to parity where we won't know ahead of time who's going to be in the finals. And we had some comments along the way like, no, Ben and Anna Lee, they're so far ahead of everybody else.
Right.
We're not going to see that for years and years. And didn't take that long, did it?
No.
Now they're going to, of course, win their fair share here going forward. But
They're still
the
dominant.
road to Sunday is so difficult.
And, you know, interestingly, so Ben only got one medal, and it was in singles, and he hasn't really been playing singles.
Right.
So that was cool to see Ben, you know, doing his thing, you know, all the cat and mouse and singles and working. But it was not an easy path for him. Several times he almost went out. Anna Lee Waters, did you see her and Brooke Buckner battle it out? Like Brooke nearly beat her on the
She was
Championship Sunday.
ripping some drives.
Brooke's accuracy, those drives are nuts. She's just great overall. Like, she was such a sleeper for me. I remember when she won her first gold in the PPA, and that was when Anna Lee wasn't playing that weekend, and I was just like, I never heard of Brooke Buckner. You know, I thought it was a one-off, but man, she is here to stay. Anyway, like Anna Lee Classic, her tiger mentality. Seriously, she has the heart of a lion. She was down. It looked dire. It looked like she was going to lose, and she was just like got herself pumped up. She was getting the crowd behind her, and just like dug down deep. You could tell like she just has no doubt. She's young enough where she hasn't experienced enough life to realize that it's not certain that you're going to win, but she has that certainty. It's so much fun to watch. I love it. Yeah. Anyway, so women's finals, that was kind of a shutout. Not a shutout. No, that was pretty close also. So I thought that, that was a nail biter too. So it was the girlies, Anna and Rachel versus ALW and Catherine.
Well, the last game was a bit of a...
Last game was a shutout.
Yeah.
But man, it was so close. Another one of these nail biters. Men's finals, did you watch Gabe and Ben play?
I did not see that one, no.
That was a good match. People are loving, like the crowd is so into Gabe. Like there was a moment where Christian, he's I don't think he's quite the villain yet in the people's perspective, but he certainly took on that persona in this final. And there was one point, he likes to yell a lot when he plays. He's like, super loud. And at one point, he won a hands battle with Gabe, and then he just like stood, right at the kitchen yelling unintelligibly at Gabe in this like deep man voice, just like, rah, rah, rah. And the crowd actually started booing big time. They hated it. But there was like this impression.
Good.
Christian's pretty young, but he's not as young as Gabe. And he looks like a grown man compared to Gabe, he looks like a child,
Yes.
And seeing this like big burly guy yelling down this little boy, it didn't sit right with me either, and people just hated it. And
Good.
the rest of the match, they were on
I hate it
Ben's
too.
side. Yeah, which is funny because normally Ben doesn't get crowd support. It's just like, oh, Ben's out there winning again. But this time it's mostly for Gabe, but they were cheering on Ben and Gabe all day. Anyway, great. It was just great entertainment. I just loved watching Mesa Cup, and I hope that's indicative of 2025 for all the pro events.
What are your thoughts on this new headshot rule?
I like it.
Do you?
Yeah.
You think it's enforceable?
I don't. Somebody gets hit in the face, then that's, what is it, a $2,500 fine?
Yeah, but how can you judge intention versus accidental? That's difficult.
Well, I think, is there intent? Is that part of the rule?
I believe it is, yeah.
Okay. Well, I don't think that should be a part of the rule. It should be if you speed up and it hits them in the face, then that's that, right?
That's the only problem I see with it is that, how can you tell if that's the case? I mean, I haven't read up on the rule, but...
Yeah. And then there's like some kind of retaliation clause or something there too, where they're looking to make sure the other team doesn't start retaliating. But, I saw Hayden pull his classic, I'm dinking, whack. Just the person, I forgot who he did it to, but I think it was Don Stanley, the lead referee, was like, so he was kind of thinking about it, and he was like, no, that wasn't above neck level. So
yeah. But it's circumstantial too. You have people who are going for like a scorpion, or they just tend to,
true.
Bend down in
That's
an
true.
athletic stance.
We've talked about this too, right?
Whose fault is that if they get hit in the face?
Yeah, I guess only extreme versions like Ben John's shot at Kwong, like no doubt about that one. That was just. He was trying to kill Guangdong. That would definitely apply for this rule. And Jay DeVillier's antics, he's done that a few times. Like, if you just wind up and hit it as hard as you can, hell, even if it hits their chest, I just think that's bad for him. But there's always a sliding scale, right? Like, in my mind, it's okay. Pegs are okay at the pro level,
sure.
And even Hayden's whacking people right in the chest. It's okay because he's not just... The ball's probably going 60 miles an hour and not 120 like Ben's or Jay's, right? And he's not doing the full backswing. It's just like tricky.
But how many coaches out there advise players go for that right shoulder? Try and chicken wing them if you can. And how far is that right shoulder from somebody's face?
That's true.
When they're moving, that's very difficult.
Yeah, and watching back video of myself, there was a few people I was playing at Lifetime, and I got pegged a few times, and it wasn't out of anger. I just, I was like, all right, this is how we're doing it. So I sped up the ball and pegged somebody back, and to me, it just felt like, a typical speed up. And then I went back and looked on video, and it was just like, what? I was like, man, that was a total Hayden Patrick move, and I didn't feel like I was being that aggressive, but that's just the nature of the sport. It just keeps becoming faster and faster
sure.
and more aggressive, and you just kind of, you adapt to it, That's why we need to regulate paddles in a big way.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Anyway.
Well, I've been hit in the face 3 times, like I said, so there's 3 fines going out next week. So just send me Venmo,
They'll be in the mail.
Whatever.
All right, let's move on to paddles of the week.
TW.
Let's go. So this week we want to talk about 2 of the paddles with the biggest buzz. I finally got the Proton Flamingos. So thank you, Charles and Brant. I know they've been super busy. I finally gave Charles a call. He picked up. I think he was in Australia at that point because they were hosting that PPA in Australia. And I was like, let me let you go. And then he picked up again last week, and he was like, all right, let me get these to you. And he didn't realize I didn't have them already. So I've been hitting with it a little bit. And obviously the biggest paddle buzz right now is over these new JOOLA Pro 4s. So you and I did our little showdown today. And we did a skinny singles match. Rally scoring to 8.
Yeah, you want to talk about our impressions before we get into the results?
Sure, yeah. Give me your impressions of. Let's start with the Flamingo.
I mean, these two paddles really are kind of the epitome of development at this point in pickleball technology. I feel like everything's coming together in this latest batch of paddles, and these two are really high flyers, in my opinion. They kind of have it all. They've got power, they've got pop, and controllability. I mean, the recipe is there.
I was feeling that more on the JOOLA 4, but that's not to say the Flamingo's not a good paddle. I was impressed with the Flamingo. I've heard kind of mixed reviews, and I was like, oh, and I think it uses a similar propulsion core as the 3S, JOOLA 3S. So it's the Peninsula with dual edge foam, or edge foam all the way around, and then that softer whitish foam. I think that's what is in this. I will find out. I'll X-ray it and cut it open. But to me, yeah, it felt, I think, is this 15 mil?
Does not say.
It feels like a 15. It doesn't feel quite as thick as a 16 and quite as thin as a 14, but could be wrong about that. Anyway, yeah, I think it played well. It had that kind of 3S feel, maybe a little softer. Although the last time I played with the 3S, it wasn't as stiff as I recalled. So I need to hit those side to side. Regardless, good paddle. What's your thought of the Perseus 4?
I mean, it's the same thing. Power, control. I would say the dwell time on the JOOLA is more consistent throughout all swing speeds, whereas for this one, I feel it more on full power hits.
Right.
But honestly, both great paddles.
Yeah.
Almost the exact same shape.
True. Let's hold them out next to each other.
Shortish handle on both of them.
By today's standards.
Yeah. If I could get another
5.5 inch handle, but
quarter inch, I'd be loving it.
Yeah. They're pretty much the exact same shape. Yeah, and we're using the 16 millimeter Perseus here, not the 14. I also have a 14. Didn't hit with that today, but I have a little bit of weight on both. The Perseus needs it less, especially the 16. The 14, I feel like the 14 at the event, at the JOOLA event, was the more popular of the two. And even with people that typically don't like thinner paddles, we're like, ooh, I like that 14 Perseus. I liked them both about equally. I'm going to give more time to the 14. But I'd say that I haven't run the swing weight measurements yet, but I think the 16 is a heavier swing weight, or heavier static weight at least, than the 3S. There's more going on inside the core that would suggest that, and that's kind of what it feels like to me.
Swing weight of this one seems higher.
Of the Flamingo? Seems high? Which one seems
Yeah.
higher? Oh, really? Oh, yeah, it does.
Couple points.
Okay. Maybe I'm wrong about the swing weight on that Perseus. Yeah, that's a heavy paddle. I didn't really remember from playing to that today. Anyway, we'll get the numbers eventually. But, yeah, how would you compare the feel of the ball off the face of the paddle on each of these?
I would put the advantage to the Proton.
Would you? Okay.
Yeah.
In what way?
It felt like the ball was sitting up on the face a little bit longer than the JOOLA, but I was hitting them, in our format of skinny singles, I'm hitting a lot more drives than I might in a full-on doubles match.
Okay. Interesting, because I feel the opposite. I feel like the Perseus had more dwell time and a bigger sweet spot. The sweet spot's fine on the Proton.
I would agree with sweet spot on that, on the JOOLA.
Yeah, I was feeling less twisting. Now, part of that's going to be the thickness. If this is indeed 15 millimeters and it's thinner, I'm pretty sure it's got to be thinner. Then that would make sense, but it's only a millimeter thinner. So regardless, I felt like there was a little bit more forgiveness on the Perseus 4. I do love the feel of the ball off the paddle on the all the new Yolas. They all have this vibration damping effect together with the big sweet spot and the dwell time that just make for a really nice contact of the ball.
You know what? I'm kind of glad we went through all this certification, decertification business, because this is, in my opinion, the best paddle Yola's put out. And we might not have it if we hadn't gone through all that business.
That's true. Kept them on their toes a little bit.
Exactly.
But yeah, I totally agree. It's the best Yola paddle to date. The way I would compare the feel of it is more similar to the mod, but a little denser feel, less vibrations, but it's got that springier feel without as much power as the mod. A lot more predictability than the mod too. So with the propulsion core of the previous models, the 3S's and the mod and the 3s before that, it has that peninsula. So I felt like, areas down here produced a lot less flyer power than the tip of the diving board. So you get kind of that, differences a lot of differences in terms of power output along the face of the paddle. This one feels more equalized. There's still a little bit of that, where sweet spot is a little higher on this than other paddles, but there's still much more response.
It's very uniform.
Yeah. This is the dual certified one, so it doesn't have as much texture as what the single UPA-A one will, but I did not feel I was missing any spin on this. The balls were dipping hard. Yeah. So I think that part of that's from the dwell, more dwell time spinning the ball, and part of it's from the grit. So you don't necessarily need the super grittiness on these Yola 4s.
Be fun to find out.
Yeah.
You know what my favorite part of this is? No gradient.
Oh, yes. It is definitely a better looking design.
I don't love the way they did this treatment, but
I kind of like that.
I like the red and the white and the black. I mean, those are pretty classic pickleball paddle colors right there. I think that's
good looking.
I really did not care for any of the 3s
A little bit loud.
in branding.
The edge guard decoration, I kept thinking that there was tungsten tape or lead tape on there.
Yeah.
I mean, there is now, but those little red strips
Right
I thought
here,
were tape.
Looking forward to the Scorpius.
I hit with the Scorpius a little
Did
bit
you?
at the event, and it's solid. Although I enjoyed the Perseus more than the Scorpius.
Oh yeah,
yeah. I don't know. I don't know why. I don't know if wide body's my shape anymore. I might be migrating away from it, or maybe it's that I loved the Scorpius. No, I was going to go a different path, but there's plenty of power in those. I would put this is something we haven't talked about yet. Firepower on both of these. I would put the firepower of the Yola Perseus IV about the same as the 3S. That's not crazy mod power. It's more muted than that, but it's good. It's definitely in the power paddle category. I wouldn't call it all court, but it's nothing crazy.
And above this,
that's my next question. I think slightly above this, but this is close to that 3S level to me. What about you?
Still not all court though.
Not all court. I'd call this a power paddle too.
Agree.
Okay.
Just a touch down from where this is in power.
Yeah. And from what I recall from the 14 millimeter, I think that it's not just an issue of this being a thinner paddle, why it's less powerful. It is what do you think the pop of this? I don't think it's not a pop. It's not skewed toward the pop side of the spectrum as much as other thinner paddles. Do you know what I mean? Most thinner paddles, super poppy, less power. This one, I feel it's pretty well balanced. Good power, good pop, but nothing crazy of each.
And again, not as poppy as this.
Maybe this similar to the 16, definitely not as poppy as the 14.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we
Initial
took these
impressions.
out
Okay, yeah.
head to head, right?
Head to head, that's right. So who won? Of the paddles.
Right. So our
score.
usual format, rally scoring to 8, switch sides of the court, do it again, switch paddles, and do that all over again. So 4 games total. Yola came out with 29 total points in that endeavor. And the Proton, 22 points.
Okay.
3 games to 1.
And Yola, respectively, was both our individual winners also.
That's right.
Which I felt like I do prefer the Yola Perseus over the Flamingo slightly. I could play with either.
Yeah.
But that was my slight preference. Sounds like you're the opposite. Sounds like you're leaning on toward the Flamingo.
I'm dead split on these two.
Okay.
I'd be happy with either one at just about the same price.
Okay. Yeah. Well, this was fun. Good paddles. Both of them have a lot of buzz, and I think they're justifiably buzzworthy.
I liked it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sounds good. Anything else on this?
No, looking for some more street time with them.
Yeah, for sure. I only have two. I almost, so they had us line up at the end and get our paddles, and it was very kind of regulated, and they call you onto my John, and they had like a little gift thing with a T-shirt and hat, and then the paddles, and then they gave me an option. Do you want the Steffi Graf Pro, or do you want the Perseus 14? I'm like, give me the Perseus 14. I was almost like, can I get two for Eddie also?
What's stopping you, man? What are they going to say? No?
I should have, yeah. But there's like a line of people behind me. I felt like I was holding everybody up. All right. Let's move on to the gear deep dive, shall we? I won't get too deep divey, but I wanted to talk about some of my initial data that I've been gathering with the PBCoR rig here in the basement. Did you take a gander at it yet?
Why, have you done something different?
I mean, it's constantly being upgraded.
I'll have to do that after the show.
Now I've got a net to catch the balls, and it's climate controlled down here now. I don't know if you can feel the humidity in the air, but it's no longer 20% humidity in here. It's 50% humidity.
It does feel more humid. It doesn't feel as cold.
It does not as cold. So I've got it in the area where the cannon is, 70 degrees Fahrenheit, and 50% humidity, which are the standards.
Wow.
Yeah. So balls and paddles hit differently in different humidity and temperatures. So holding those variables constant is pretty key. And I've got the new laser gate. So thank you to Keith. He is the engineer who made it by hand, and it works amazing. So much better than the setup I had before with two opposed gates, basically, which were made by Caldwell, and you can for guns and arrows and that sort of thing. But they were spaced out from each other to the extent that the ball is slowing down as it's moving, so it was screwing up the PBCoR. So this is one unit, just kind of a box, and it's got a bunch of lasers, and it's really similar to USAP and UPA and PPL's labs. So it just connects to the computer, spits out inbound, outbound speed, and the ratio. And Keith walked me through actually plugging in all the variables and numbers into the PBCoR formula. So I'm actually getting real PBCoR results. So there's swing weight involved, there's center of percussion, and all these other good things where you clamp the paddle. And so far, so good. I did a broken in Gearbox Pro Power Elongated, and then I did the Selkirk Lux, and my results are going to slightly vary from both PPL and USAP. I landed on the Franklin X40 ball. It's just a standard ball, and I wanted to use a ball with holes instead of the holeless balls. I do have holeless balls here from both Gamma and Franklin, but I think it's better to use a lower speed with a ball with holes, and I'm also getting a coefficient of restitution on the balls themselves. So I'm calculating that into the variable and into the formula.
For each ball specifically?
Each ball, right.
Okay.
I shoot it at a cinder block and get its inbound, outbound velocity at 50 miles per hour, and I'm shooting the paddle at 50 miles per hour too. So a lot of reasons why I'm using 50 miles per hour instead of 60 like USAP, and also a ball with holes instead of one without. It'll become clear when we look at this chart in a second why. But back to the gearbox, it got like a 4.5 PBCoR, and the Selkirk Lux got like a 3.3. So that's kind of right in line with what I was expecting. And my PBCoR is going to be lower, all other things being equal, to what USAP is using, because that ball without holes has an internal pressure. It can't release the air inside, so it comes off a lot hotter. I've been shooting that one of these, and it comes off much faster. So I would imagine that my 0.45 is going to be closer to like 0.5 something for.
So it's 0.45.
Yeah, 0.45.
Gotcha.
Did I say 45?
Yeah.
Anyway.
4.5.
Yeah. Okay, right. So 0.45 and 0.33,
Yes.
right?
Right.
So something really low for the Lux. And then I started some other paddles. The original Perseus Gen 3, the one that's been delisted and sunset. That one got really similar to the Gearbox Pro Power Elongated, like 0.44, right? And then I started with other paddles. I wanted to try the PaddleTech ESQC 12.7. And that one got it much lower than I expected. So it came in like at 3.38 is what I recall.
Wow.
That coming in at. And I'm shooting the ball at half-inch intervals all the way down the face. And, finding the spot on the paddle that returns the most energy, right? Not what I expected for the Rhombus Ripple R2. This one right there. Here, grab that paddle. I have it marked on there. See the inches?
Yeah.
So they're kind of worn down. Guess where the center percussion, where the ball hits along that spectrum that returns the most energy.
Well, by the fact that you're asking me this question, I'm going to say 3.
7,
which is way down here.
That was the spot that returned the most energy in the PBCoR rig. And I tested it over and over. I shot like 100 shots at each of those markers and in between, in the half-inch markers.
This is a paddle for me then. 'Cause that's where I normally hit the ball.
Crazy odd. I don't know what to think of it. All the others were right where we expected, like right on the sweet spot. That's not the sweet spot of the Ripple either. But regardless,
That's interesting.
interesting result. Okay, so really preliminary results, but it's coming along, and there's an anomaly already. So the ESQC is getting much lower than I thought. Something to do with the swing weight. So I'm very interested in how swing weight controls things. Now, I have some data here from Keith. Keith is in parallel with me setting up his home PBCoR rig, and he has a little more data. And we're looking at a scatter plot now based on, it looks like, 6 paddles from the Thrive Azul, the Apes Pulse V, there's a Friday paddle in there, Yola Vision, Legacy Pro, and a broken Ruby, which isn't broken in the way you'd think. It's not core crushed, but apparently it lost all its power. I don't know what happened with that. Anyway, so this is totally fascinating to me, and this is the data that I'm getting also. So Keith sent me this a couple weeks ago. I was like, this is crazy, not what I expected. So many things to talk about on this. And with my data, like I said, I'm seeing the same core. So on the x-axis, we have inbound speed, and y-axis, outbound speed. What you can see is at low speeds, everything is converged. There's not much difference at all in terms of the power output of paddles. And as you start increasing the speed, you start to get separation in a big way for these paddles.
Up to a point.
Up to a point, and that point for the power paddles, more powerful paddles, like Gen 2, Gen 3 paddles, is 50 miles an hour. And then it starts dropping. For more control-oriented paddles, there's around 40 miles an hour is the peak, and then it starts dropping after that. 35, 40 miles an hour. So this thing here, and I can't say we've confirmed for sure, but I would say that signs point to this idea that there is an exponential power curve that is busted. This is the opposite of exponential, right? So what we see is a linear, well, not even a linear, but there's a correlation between inbound speed and power up to a point, and then it starts reversing itself and dropping. Now I know why, because a pickleball, returns energy while its shape is, not deformed. And as soon as you start getting like a lot of deformation of the ball face as it hits the paddle with a lot of speed, it screws up the energy return of that ball coming off the paddle. It's basically like it becomes absorbing at that point.
So it's ball energy, not paddle return energy.
Exactly, right.
Gotcha.
So that's why I chose a ball with holes, because they act very differently from balls with holes. Now you're going to see a very different curve here. And what I'll do is I'll chart this out with the hole-less ball. eventually I have this feeling it'll drop, but it's going to be later, right? Because even a ball without holes is going to eventually deform and have a hard time rebounding off the paddle. Regardless, this I found fascinating. So the idea of an exponential power curve doesn't look like reality at this point.
Whose concept was it that there would be an exponential power curve?
It's an impression that a lot of us paddle reviewers have been talking about for a while now. It's what I think we're feeling in the paddle is a steeper trajectory of this positive relationship between speed and ball response, swing speed and ball response. A steeper relationship, but not an exponential one where it curves up, right? So it's kind of the impression you get, but when you actually see the data, it also makes sense because you're like, okay, yeah, they definitely hit differently than control paddles. Like you get a steeper relationship, steeper positive relationship. But what we're kind of missing is that when you take like full swings at the ball, and what you need to think about here on this chart is not only looking at the inbound speed and being like, okay, the ball is hit at 50 miles an hour, then you start losing. No, add that inbound speed together with the outbound. Add the inbound to the outbound speed. So look at the 50 mile an hour mark for inbound. Go up to one of the more powerful paddles, so the Pulse V. Mm-hmm. And then go over to the y-axis, and it looks like it was hit about 18 miles an hour.
Right.
So that's 68 miles an hour. How often do we hit a ball 68 miles an hour plus on the court? Not often. I mean, outside of Deckelbar's serve, even his serve, honestly, it's around 60 miles an hour, right, for his big serves. Overhead smashes, yeah, they go faster than that. But it's not often. You're not going to pick up on the subtleties of this drop-off because at speeds of over 60 miles an hour, it just doesn't happen very often on the court.
But there's an incoming ball speed for, like, say, drives or not a serve so much, but definitely a ground stroke.
Yeah. Yeah, well, that's what I'm saying. Like when you add these together, because it's a stationary paddle, right? So it's exactly the same as dropping a ball, so the ball's stationary, and swinging your serve, right? So the ball has the 0 miles per hour, and all of the miles per hour of your paddle is what's giving the velocity to the ball. That's kind of reverse here. The ball is coming at a stationary paddle and then coming back off. Mm-hmm. So when a ball is coming in real play, the ball has momentum, your paddle has momentum. You add that miles per hour to both to get, the basically inbound speed.
Right.
And then how fast the ball goes out is the outbound. So what we're thinking of here is for the outbound is adding the V inbound versus outbound speed, and it kind of gives you an idea of how fast the ball would play on the court. So regardless, this drop-off for power paddles in particular doesn't happen until after like 60 miles an hour. For control paddles, we feel it in the gameplay, right? Because it happens around 35 miles an hour. That's just a low-key drive, right? Mm-hmm. Not even a fast serve. And over that, I think that contributed to our impression that we had a exponential power curve because we're so used to these. We've been playing for the past couple of years with all like low power paddles, and suddenly these more powerful paddles come into play, and we're getting more response as we're swinging faster as the ball's coming as faster with counters. We're just like, holy cow, I've never seen this kind of power. So that gives a false impression in our heads of exponential power curve, when in fact that's not the case. We have this. I'm sure there's a name for this shape of curve. I mean, it's kind of a bell curve,
A little bit.
But bell curve, I think, has more to do with like line charts, and this is more of a scatter plot. So anyhow, good stuff. Thank you, Keith, for this data. I'm getting the same data in mine. It's going to be fascinating to kind of flesh it all out.
So do you think manufacturers could use this information to sort of optimize their designs? The tests are at 60 miles an hour, and that's kind of the point where we start to see that rebound velocity start to drop. So could they optimize for 60 miles an hour, but yet get a higher return value at lower speeds?
Yeah, 100%. There's ways to game this system already. And what I'm going to do with my data is not just focus just on 50 miles an hour. I'm going to shoot it at starting at about 20, where you see on this chart everything kind of converges. I might start at 30 because there's no reason that all paddles are going to be about the same at 20, and go up to, let's say, 70 miles an hour. So I'm going to have a whole gamut, so I can look at this kind of chart for all kinds of paddles and use that for my power and pop metrics, because you're seeing both in here. You're seeing a separation of power and pop within these metrics here. Yeah. Speaking of, I'm thinking about trying to moderate a panel at RacquetX in Florida in March, and invite both PPL, Pro Pickle Labs, and USAP, and have a discussion about like transparency and paddle regulations. And it was actually brought up to me by PPL. They're like, "Hey, would you want to do something like this? You can invite us." And so I'm like, paddle reviewer doing this, but I guess it makes sense. I would love to see that discussion, and I would love to talk about these kind of data and have everybody sitting down at the table together. And I know there's another panel there at the same time where you've got Tom Barnes from Selkirk, and there's Nick Pachanich from Reload, and Raphael from Gearbox, and they've got, I think, Jason from UPA-A. That's more going to be like a talk about like, how do regulations affect the paddle industry, paddle manufacturers? What I want to talk about is like a more academic thing, like, okay, why a ball with holes versus without? Why 50 miles an hour versus 60 miles an hour? Can we all kind of start to, come to an agreement? Because right now they're working kind of in parallel, and it was pretty clear from my visit to both labs that, there's not a lot of crosstalk. And I think it would be phenomenal for them to talk about these things and then address like, okay, like we adopted the formula from baseball, the PBCoR formula. Maybe the swing weight of a bat is very different than the swing weight of a paddle. So maybe we shouldn't be squaring the swing weight in the PBCoR formula, because that would allow for shorter paddles with more power to slip under the radar. Maybe, I don't know. These are my initial impressions. Also, what we're thinking of power on the pickleball court has a lot to do with big, powerful swings, drives and serves in the baseline, but it also has to do with these motions of the kitchen. And that's actually what you're more focused on. And there's more an impression of power at the kitchen with the poppy shots than it is at the baseline, because you're 14 feet away from people, and a 30-mile-an-hour ball hit 14 miles away is really hard to get back. A 60-mile-an-hour serve, if you're standing well beyond the baseline, is easy to get back. So think about the baseball bat. Besides like bunting, it doesn't matter. Like, you don't have little flicky things with a baseball bat. Every shot is trying to kill the ball, trying to murder the ball and hit it over the fence. So in that case, maybe the swing weight is kind of uniform for baseball bats, and I'm sure that they're standardized in terms of their length, and there's a very narrow range of length. Maybe it's less range of length than pickleball paddles. Anyway, my thought is that maybe the regulation agencies have not really thought about, can we adopt wholesale the PBCoR formula and it's going to work for pickleball? Now, a lot brighter minds than myself with more engineering backgrounds have worked on this, so I'm sure they can speak about it much more intelligently than me. But from my perspective as a paddle reviewer, that seems to be an issue with the swing weight and the formula, that it might be throwing things off, and it might be why we're getting weird, wonky results from USAP already.
Well, John, I support it. I could think of no better person to moderate such a panel.
Well, I appreciate it.
And frankly, it's, why not you? You're independent. You're not biased.
Yeah.
You're just there to learn like everybody else. So.
Yeah, and I kind of like the
If
idea.
not you, who, John?
You, Eddie.
No.
Co-moderator.
I'm too busy playing, getting whacked in the face.
All right. I've bored enough people to tears with my deep dive. That's it. So we got some Q&A to get to.
Yeah, you got one, right?
Yeah. So Justin Spain emailed and asked, are you or anyone at UPA-A or PPL doing any testing for sweet spot? It'd be great for every paddle to be tested for a sweet spot and give the consumer a heat map of the sweet spot on the paddle. Ah, yes. The elusive heat map of the paddle. I would love, this has been on my, been on my mind for over a year now. And I've been piddling away my basement on different things and ways to do this. Haven't been successful yet, but definitely with the PBCoR rig, the Canon, I've got direct measurements along this linear corridor of the paddle. So I can map the sweet spot this way on every paddle I've done so far. So can USAP, and so can and PPL. The issue is going side to side.
Yeah.
So what I'd like to start doing is finding the area in the center that provides the most ball response, so the center of the sweet spot, right? And then doing some similar measurements laterally, and then mapping the sweet spot in that way, so I can get a rough heat map in that regard. What I think is going to happen is that it's not going to directly relate to our experience of the sweet spot on the court. And the reason why I say this is because sweet spot is more than the paddle's ability to shoot the ball off the face. That's part of it. That's probably the biggest part of it, right? The ball response off the face. Like if you hit it over here, it's going to die. If you hit it here, the ball's going to shoot off. I think there's more to it than that, though. I think vibration frequencies play a role. I think the overall swing weight and twist weight play a role beyond just the ball velocity coming off the face. In other words, if the twist weight isn't big enough and the paddle twists, not only is it going to kind of kill the ball, but it also gives you an unpleasant feeling in your hand. So a paddle with more overall weight is going to have more plow through in it. That enhances the perception of a sweet spot beyond just the velocity of the ball off the face. But that's a goal, is to kind of produce heat maps and objectify it a little bit. But sweet spot is one of these areas where there's a lot of subjectivity involved, and I think there always will be.
Yeah, and it's not just a finite point on a paddle. It is an area, mm-hmm. right? And so, what is the tolerable return that somebody's going to feel, where they feel like, I got what I expected to get out of that particular shot?
Exactly.
So how do you define that?
Exactly.
Because you can find where that center of percussion is and everything else, but what's the area around that a normal person would consider being a legitimate part of the sweet spot?
Exactly. And what I might do is to get the heat map, simply enter the ratio of inbound to outbound speed along those points I measured on the paddle, and then kind of spread it out. So, and then probably standardize it so that, definitely have to standardize it, because some paddles are more powerful than others. So, kind of cap it at max power output and have that red, for example, one color of red, regardless if it's a Ripple or the Selkirk Lux, same starting color, and then show it kind of moving to blue outside of that, you know what I mean, based on that ratio. And if you standardize that for each paddle, it would give you a heat map of what the ball velocity off the face of the paddle in these different areas would look like. And I think that's probably the best way to do it. But like I said, I think it's not going to exactly match our perception of the sweet spot on the court. Yeah. So great question. Something I've been thinking about, and you've been thinking about. You brought it up before too, for a good while now.
Well, here's a question from RTJPB, and it has to do with this entire discussion we've just been having. Will wrapping the entire head of the paddle, Annalise style, he calls it, decrease the pop and increase the sweet spot? And, I recently wrapped a Pulse V and 0.5 gram per inch just above the handle all the way around, and offset that with a 22 gram flick cap on the butt of the paddle. Feels amazing and hits like a truck. I'm sure it does. Mm-hmm. But there's a downside to that, John.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, hand speed. And you can't go from zero to, you can't get velocity on your paddle as quickly. So he's exactly right. You're losing pop and gaining sweet spot and opposite power as well.
Yeah. Okay, so pluses and minuses. But you are going to open up that sweet spot quite a bit with that much weight.
For sure. I know I got PBCoR in the brain, but my next experiment does adding lead tape.
That's a great
to the
next
paddle
step. Change
the PBCoR, and it absolutely will. I thought no before, but I didn't realize they weren't calculating swing weight into the equation. Mm-hmm. So even if, let's say that the ball response off the face is exactly the same with lead tape versus without, it'll change the output, the PBCoR output, because it's going to have a different swing weight. Yep. Now, I'm just saying this. This is my hunch. I can't say that with 100% certainty, and there could be, somebody from Curtis or somebody from USAP can correct me if I'm wrong, but that's my impression. So that's going to be my next experiment.
Yeah, that Franklin C45 behind you is another example, like crazy low swing weight, but you can stack and rack that thing with all kinds of weight.
For sure. Yeah.
Turn it into a cannon. By the way, in my Pulse V, I've got about 6 inches of half gram per inch on each side.
Okay.
It's a fair bit of weight, but it does feel amazing.
Okay.
I would agree with that.
Nice. Okay. Let me change up the battery real quick. All righty. Lay it on me. What's the
All
next
right.
question?
Last question of the day, John. This from Alexander Cochran 806. Alexander has sold his TruFoam Genesis 2. Just not loving it. Felt inconsistent. Sometimes was nice and sometimes really poppy. A little too underwhelming and unpredictable. And Alexander's friends felt the same way. Kind of think I'd like these paddles without the fiberglass square or a complete fiberglass sheet, but the little square is a little too small and changes the paddles on that spot too much. And I guess he's wondering if you experience the same thing or if you've heard some of those things as well.
I have hit with the TruFoam a couple times after coming from my main, which is the 11624 Vapor Power. And it took me a sec to dial in. And I had the same impression like, oh, that serve went way out and, I need to figure that out versus the pop. And sometimes it felt poppier than others.
Yeah.
But once I played with it for a good while, everything kind of came together. So I feel a little bit of what he's saying, and maybe he did play with it for an extended period, and it just wasn't the paddle for him. That's going to happen. But once I spent time with it and got it dialed in, I think it's an exceptional paddle.
About how big is that fiberglass area within the...
I would say like 4x4.
It's pretty sizable then.
Yeah. I mean, it covers more than the sweet spot.
If you're missing that, then you're probably...
Yeah, I mean, you're not getting any response from the ball outside of that, typically.
Right.
So I don't think it's necessarily the size of that square. It might just be he doesn't like the response of fiberglass in general. I don't know did he say what he's playing with before?
No.
Okay. So, yeah, I feel you. And maybe the paddle's just not for you. I wouldn't pin it on having just an isolated fiberglass sheet. I don't think that matters. Maybe it's the fiberglass itself, or just something about the TruFoam itself just doesn't jive with them. I
have heard people talk about pop-ups here and there, but I haven't really experienced that on my Carbon 2. So
yeah,
keep at it.
It plays a little differently than other paddles.
Sure.
You just got to get used to it, and once you do, in my experience, it's a really cool paddle.
Yeah. All right. That's it for Q&A this week, John.
Thank you, Eddie. And it's been a couple of weeks, so I always enjoy our time together in this luxurious, massive studio that I have.
Well, we'll get back to our usual Tuesday afternoon hit-arounds.
Yep, that's for sure. We're late this week, but back on track next week.
All right, John.
Good time, sir.
Take care.